For 27 years, Karl Bushby has walked more than 20,000 miles without ever stepping onto a plane or into a car. Driven by a vow to circle the entire planet on foot, he has risked his life in jungles, nearly frozen to death, lost love, and sunk every penny he had, yet still finds himself stranded, the dream unfinished, 8,000 miles from home. Is this a visionary proving the limits of human endurance, or obsession spiraling beyond reason? As Bushby himself asks, "I don't know yet. Ask me when I reach Hull." The answer starts with the day he made the vow. November 1st, 1998, in the wind-swept city of Punta Arenas, Chile, a former British Army paratrooper tightened the straps on a 70-pound pack, checked the laces of custom-built boots, and stepped away from the last bus stop at the end of the world. Karl Bushby had spent years preparing for this moment. Every detail was calculated. Gear chosen for jungle, desert and ice, savings emptied into satellite beacons and water purifiers, and enough spare socks to last 1,000 miles. But what set his journey apart was not the equipment or the training. It was a single, uncompromising rule. No flights, no cars, not even a bicycle. From that first step, he pledged to reach Hull, England, by nothing but the movement of his own feet. Bushby's vow was forged in the discipline of the British military, where endurance was survival and rules were absolute. The no motors rule was not just a logistical challenge, it became a moral code. He would not allow himself shortcuts, even when the world's borders, weather, or war tried to force his hand. This promise would shape every decision for decades, even when it meant years of waiting for a visa or retracing hundreds of miles rather than accept a single ride. The cost was immediate and personal. He left behind family in Hull, knowing the journey would stretch on for years, maybe decades. There would be no return until the walk was complete. Friends called it madness. Some saw a kind of desperate courage. Bushby himself called it a test, not of distance, but of whether a single human will could hold fast against the world's chaos. The first step out of Punta Arenas was not just the beginning of a journey, it was the start of a promise that nothing, not even the world itself, could break. The first 9,000 miles were a lesson in pain. Karl Bushby crossed the Andes again and again, each pass higher and colder than the last. The thin air hammered his lungs, while the weight of his pack dug grooves into his shoulders. Nights brought frostbite warnings, days brought sunburn and dehydration. On the open road he moved alone for weeks on end, sleeping in ditches or behind gas stations, surviving on bread and whatever donations strangers pressed into his hands. His custom boots, built to last 1,000 miles, were shredded by rock and salt before he even reached Peru. Blisters peeled skin from his heels and toes until each step felt like walking on knives. By the time he reached the equator, he had counted over a dozen pairs of boots destroyed and lost several toenails to infection. His feet were so battered that he sometimes walked with them wrapped in duct tape, blood seeping through the seams. The road north was relentless. Hunger was a constant companion, and so was exhaustion. There were days when he doubted the idea was even possible, but each brutal mile proved something. The rule held, he could keep moving, even when his body begged to stop. In the high passes and empty stretches, the line between vision and madness blurred. Was this proof of human endurance, or just the start of a slow unravelling? Bushby pressed on, each step a wager that the answer would only come if he never allowed himself to quit. The Darién Gap is a place that swallows men whole. For 3 months, Karl Bushby moved alone through the heat and darkness of the jungle, 100 miles of swamp, tangled roots, and silence broken by the sound of machete against vines. He carried a 60-pound pack, each item chosen for survival: iodine tablets, duck to maize, a battered map, and a single change of clothes that rotted in the humidity. There were no roads, no reliable trails, only shifting animal paths and the constant threat of FARC patrols or cartel scouts. Local villagers warned him that foreigners disappeared here. Sometimes he found bullet casings in the mud, other times he found nothing at all. Every step was a negotiation with the jungle. Bushby hacked through walls of green, slept on high ground to avoid flash floods, and rationed food until hunger hollowed his cheeks. Mosquitoes swarmed at dusk, carrying the risk of malaria. His feet rotted in wet boots, skin peeling away in strips. An infected machete cut on his calf festered for weeks, forcing him to limp. By the time he staggered out on the Panama side, he had lost 30 pounds. The world narrowed to the basics. Keep moving, don't get sick, don't get found. The jungle did not care about records or glory. Bushby's only audience was the relentless rain and the knowledge that a single mistake could end everything. When Panamanian authorities detained him for visa violations, he spent days in a concrete cell waiting for paperwork to clear, uncertain if he would ever be allowed to continue. In the Darién, the line between endurance and self-destruction felt razor thin. The question, madness or vision, echoed louder with each mile, but Bushby pressed on, one step at a time, toward the open highway and the next impossible stretch. 14,000 miles north of Panama, the road stretched on, without promise of an ending. Karl Bushby walked through the heat of Death Valley, where the air shimmered at 120 degrees and the soles of his boots softened like wax. He crossed the Rockies in winter, bracing against winds that cut straight through his jacket, his breath freezing on his beard. Frostbite turned 3 toes numb, a permanent reminder that the cold was never just discomfort, it was damage. The Pan-American Highway was less a road than a test of patience. Days blurred into weeks, then years. Each morning, he shouldered his pack and counted out the steps, measuring progress in cracked miles and lost toenails. There were stretches where the only voices he heard belonged to the radio or the wind. Isolation became a constant companion, more reliable than any friend or lover. Money ran out long before Alaska appeared on the horizon. Bushby took odd jobs, washing dishes, fixing fences, sleeping behind gas stations when he could not afford a room. The walk consumed everything: time, savings, even hope for a normal life. He spoke of pushing human limits, but critics saw only a man driven by something darker, unable to stop even as the world he'd left behind drifted further out of reach. Relationships at home withered. He would later admit, twice, lost both of circumstances. The cost was never just physical. By the time the Arctic Circle came into view, Bushby was no longer the man who started in Chile. The line between endurance and obsession had blurred, and the question, madness or vision, hung heavier with every silent mile. In March 2006, Karl Bushby and Dmitry Kiefer stood on the edge of the Alaskan coast, facing a stretch of ice and open water few had ever attempted to cross on foot. Their sleds weighed close to 200 pounds each, packed with food, fuel and survival gear, everything needed for a journey where rescue was impossible. The plan was simple in theory: travel west, crossing the Bering Strait's shifting pack ice from Alaska to Russia. In reality, the ice moved beneath them, cracking open to reveal black water, then grinding shut without warning. Temperatures plunged to -50 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. Each day, they measured progress by the mile, dragging their sleds over pressure ridges as tall as houses, sometimes crawling, sometimes swimming short gaps, when the ice broke apart. The cold was constant, but so was the threat of the ice itself, floes drifting toward the Arctic Ocean, creaking and groaning under their weight. Every step forward risked disaster. At night they slept in tents pitched on ice that might not be there by morning. The crossing took 15 days. By the time they reached Russian soil, they had covered nearly 150 miles, their bodies battered, faces burned by wind and cold. Russian border guards met them on the far shore. There was no welcome, only handcuffs and questions. Bushby and Kiefer had crossed into Russia without visas, breaking international law. The achievement, the first post-Cold War crossing of the Strait on foot, was overshadowed by the reality of arrest and deportation. Years of planning and weeks of survival on moving ice came up against a different barrier. Not nature, but politics. The walk had pushed human limits, but the world's borders had the final word. Russian law is not built for adventurers. The moment Karl Bushby and Dmitry Kiefer stepped onto the Chukotka coast in March 2006, the expedition left the realm of survival and entered the machinery of the state. They were detained for illegal entry, no visa, no official invitation, just battered passports and a story that sounded like fiction. In Anadyr, a district court sentenced Bushby to deportation and imposed a 5-year ban from Russian territory. The decision was swift, impersonal, and final. The walk that had survived jungle, desert, and ice was now at the mercy of paperwork and bureaucracy. Bushby tried to fight the ban. He hired lawyers, filed appeals, and pleaded his case from afar. Each attempt cost thousands of dollars, money scraped together from donations, odd jobs, and what little remained of his savings. Russian visa law left little room for negotiation. The ban held, and every season lost meant another year of waiting for the tundra to thaw. Another year when the dream of an unbroken walk slipped further away. The expedition's fate was no longer decided by the strength of his legs or the will to endure, but by the shifting priorities of foreign ministries and border officials. For 4 years, Bushby watched the window close. The cost of a single misstep on the ice became measured in years, not miles. In the end, the border guards had succeeded where mountains and jungles had failed, halting the walk not with force, but with stamps and signatures. The journey's greatest obstacle was no longer natural. It was administrative, indifferent, and absolute. Wind carves the Siberian tundra into a white, endless plain. Karl Bushby moves through it alone, his boots sinking into crusted snow, his breath freezing on his scarf. Since 2012, every step in Russia has been dictated by a 90-day visa, an unyielding clock that starts the moment he enters and then forces him out again, regardless of weather or distance left to cover. The window for walking is brief. Temperatures plunge to -60 degrees Fahrenheit, storms strip the sky of colour, and the villages are sometimes 200 miles apart. There are stretches where he does not see another human for 9 days. The only sound is wind and the crunch of frost underfoot. He counts his steps by the thousands, toes growing numb and staying that way for good. Permanent sensory loss, with 3 toes dead to the world, becomes a fact of life. The cold is not just pain, but erasure, a slow sanding away of what his body once could feel. The landscape is indifferent. On the worst days, storms flatten the horizon and visibility drops to nothing. He pitches his tent in the lee of a drift and waits out blizzards that last for days. Food freezes solid. Water has to be chipped from river ice, boiled, and drunk before it turns back to slush. Sometimes he wakes to find his boots frozen stiff and his feet refusing to move. There is no rescue, no shortcut, only the next step. Injury becomes routine, knees grind, tendons ache, and the cold seeps into the bones. Even when the weather breaks, time does not. The visa clock keeps ticking, and every delay means another year lost to bureaucracy. The body is battered, the mind stretched thin, and the way forward narrows to a paper wall, one stamp, one signature that can stop the journey cold. In the heart of Moscow, Karl Bushby found himself trapped by a barrier no amount of endurance could overcome. After years of braving the world's harshest landscapes, his fate now rested in the hands of bureaucrats and border officials. The language was clinical: security concerns, unauthorized presence, failure to comply with entry protocols. Each phrase, stamped and signed, carried more weight than any mountain or frozen river. The rules were absolute: 90 days to walk, then out. Miss a deadline, lose a season; miss a season, lose a year. The window for progress shrank to a sliver, and even a flawless plan could be undone by a single missing document. Bushby's world narrowed from endless tundra to a single room, waiting for papers that might never arrive. The cost of each delay was measured in more than lost miles. Every month in limbo meant another year away from home, another chance for his body to break down, another relationship left to wither. The walk had always been a test of will, but now it was a contest against a faceless system, indifferent to promises or pain. For the first time, the real antagonist was not nature, but paperwork, an invisible wall that no amount of walking could cross. Karl Bushby's journey ran on a shoestring, funds scraped from emptied savings, unpredictable donations, and the rare generosity of strangers. Each step came at a cost. His 70-pound pack carried everything he needed, but every ounce slowed him down and wore through gear. Custom boots, built to last 1,000 miles, often failed early, destroyed by salt, frost, or sheer repetition. Replacements were expensive, and socks vanished in batches. His battered tent, patched again and again, barely held up against the elements. Food was a constant calculation. To keep moving, he burned over 5,000 calories a day, rationing bread, noodles, or whatever locals could spare. Hunger was a daily companion, weight loss a certainty. When money ran out, he traded labor for cash, washing dishes, fixing fences, sleeping rough when there was no other option. The expedition's arithmetic was relentless: miles per boot, calories per dollar, pain per day. For Bushby, the walk became an ongoing tally of what a body could withstand in pursuit of a single, unbroken line. 30,000 miles behind him, Karl Bushby faces a gap that numbers can't quite close. On paper, the finish line is near, just a few thousand miles left to Hull. Yet after 27 years, the true distance is harder to measure. The world sees a man who refused every shortcut, who walked through jungles, deserts, and bureaucratic dead ends. But the question that lingers is whether this is endurance or obsession. A psychologist reviewing the expedition logs points to the classic hallmarks: single-minded focus, the sacrifice of relationships, the willingness to endure chronic pain and isolation. She asks, when does commitment turn into compulsion? At what point does the journey stop serving the man, and the man start serving the journey? Bushby's own words don't offer easy answers. He says it's not about the destination, it's proving human limits can be pushed. Pressed on whether he regrets the cost, he hesitates. I don't know yet. Ask me when I reach Hull. The world is left to wonder. If the last mile is never walked, does the meaning vanish? Or is the attempt, the refusal to stop, the real achievement? Today, Karl Bushby stands at a bureaucratic impasse. 27 years, 20,000 miles, and the finish line still out of reach. Is this vision or madness? The numbers, frostbite, lost savings, decades alone, demand we weigh the cost of obsession. In a world obsessed with completion, Bushby proves that sometimes the most human question is not whether we finish, but why we cannot stop striving. Share your thoughts below.